Going. There we are, we're live. Jonny was just speculating, running off for another coffee, but we're here. With the Rangers review morning briefing on Monday, the 3rd of January. It's our first briefing of a new year, Jonny, I think, is it? So happy
As
New Year.
indeed, yes. Yes, happy New Year to all our viewers. Great to be back on the video cast after a few days and various issues with people being ill and whatnot. So, great to be back and talking about Rangers again.
Absolutely, and we'll just start with the consistent reminder to, if you're watching on YouTube, folks, to press subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we don't just go live in the mornings, and that will keep you up to date with when we are talking all things Rangers. Right, well, there's only one topic this morning, Jonny, which is Nathan Patterson, who seems to be moving ever closer to a move to Everton. Rafa Benitez's Everton. It's links that have been there for some time. I don't think it has surprised anyone. Patterson's only started twice in the league this season. Obviously, the debate around him and Tavernier has gone on for a long time now. Where are we at with the deal, Jonny? And what is the latest development in the last kind of few hours or so?
So, as I understand it, there's been agreement reached between Rangers and Everton. The deal is still to be agreed with the player, which is the most important part. So there'll have to be a medical done. That's not been done yet. There'll have to be personal terms agreed. That's not been done yet. However, a wise man would tell you that it'd be highly unlikely there'd be an issue with personal terms. I would suggest, given that Everton are a Premier League club with a huge wage ceiling, and Nathan Patterson, by comparison to the likes of myself and you, Joshua, and your average punter on the street, he'll be earning very, very good money at Rangers, but he won't be on so much that it'll be difficult, I don't think, to negotiate a deal there, and I think Everton will be able to sort that out. Don't see the reason why lad would struggle with a medical either. He's been physically very, very solid for Rangers over the years. In terms of the deal itself, the figures that are being widely reported are accurate. So you're looking at a record fee for Rangers, one that will smash the 9 million that was paid for Alan Hutton by Tottenham back in 2007, I think. And that's just the upfront fee. That's not when you're talking about the add-ons that could take this into a stratospheric amount for the club. And you have to say, Joshua, when you're talking about this kind of money for a player who isn't even a first-team regular, there's actually a bigger thing at play here than just this is a very, very good deal for all concerned, for the player, for Everton, for Rangers. The bigger thing is that it sets a marker down for the kind of money that Rangers are going to accept going forward when people inevitably come either this window or next for the likes of Morelos, Aribo and Kent, because the kind of money that we're talking about that this potentially could lead to for a player who can't get in the team means that there's not going to be any lowball nonsense around these other players, because Rangers can point to this deal as an example of why they are now a club that's operating a proper, feasible transfer model, player trading model, and I think that's a really, really good achievement for Ross Wilson. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to see a player like this go, a young player who's come through the system, an incredible talent. I think I called him on Twitter a generational talent, and I believe that is an absolutely fair and balanced assessment of Patterson based on a number of factors. But you have to be a pragmatist, and this is the right move from a pragmatic point of view. Patterson is not going to usurp James Tavernier anytime soon. We've already seen the problem in getting him game time. And ultimately, the kind of money that has been offered here is such that, given the situation that Rangers have been in, where they've overspent deliberately to build the team up to this stage, to build the players up to this stage, then I think it's just an absolute no-brainer. And listen, I think Everton are getting a terrific deal as well for this player. And that's not a lot of money for a Premier League club. and I'm sure he'll be worth a lot more in the years to come. But for where Rangers are as a club, I think it's a sensational bit of business.
Yeah, and do let us know what you think in the comments, folks. It seems to be that, although reluctant, there's an acceptance of what you're saying, Jonny, that looking at the wider picture, this is the right move. And although, Nathan Patterson, I think if he played in 10 of the other 11 positions on the pitch, he wouldn't have had this issue where he'd have only started 2 league games this season. But naturally, as you say, is trying to get in front of James Tavernier, which we'll come to. But I want to just touch more on the Ross Wilson topic, Jonny. Just like the kind of the managerial change, I think this is a good example of Ross Wilson talking the talk, if you will, or walking the walk, whichever one it is. Because you're right, this has been spoken about for a long time. Selling players at the right time for the right value. Obviously, we think a bid was knocked back in the previous window, which was significantly lower than the one that's been agreed, as you say, this window. And that's, I think, in my mind, the sign of a good football club and a well-run football club that will do its business in quiet. And as I say, we'll walk the walk after Ross Wilson has spoken about this kind of development for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rangers don't discuss transfer dealings. They keep it quiet. They keep their cards close to their chest. And that's a very big difference from previous years and going back a long way. In terms of this deal, Joshua, I just think it's an absolute no-brainer. From a financial point of view, we all know what the situation was in the recent accounts, but we all know why. We know the context. Much smarter people and much more intelligent people, much more knowledgeable people about this than myself, like the likes of Kieran Maguire, who runs the Price of Football podcast and has written books about football finance and is a professor at Liverpool University, wrote on our website a very detailed piece about the accounts and why you can't just look at the top line figure of around 22 million, I think it was, that that Rangers lost. But the club have been absolutely open and honest about the fact that the player trading model is essential to have the club running properly, to have the club running in a sustainable way. And listen, the fact that the fans are aware of this, that the club's been open about it, I think that's why you're seeing such a balanced reaction to this, because people understand the whole situation with Tavernier and why he's playing ahead of them. And they understand the holistic situation going on at the club and why that money will be necessary to help ensure that the club's in a good financial position. I think it's, as Gordon Herriot's just said, it's in the comments, it's just very good business, Joshua.
It is, yeah. And presumably, again, Nathan Patterson will have competition for right back. Seamus Coleman at Everton, who is a club legend, I think. He would qualify, but he's 33. I don't think uprooting him will be as difficult as uprooting James Tavernier. And equally, you can see the appeal from Patterson's point of view of he's only played 2 league minutes. 2 league minutes, that would be very low. Made 2 league starts this season. You cast your mind back to the summer and that Rangers TV interview Stephen Gerrard did, which has provoked so much conversation about variation, and Nathan Patterson and James Tavernier. He said, I can't have one of them on the bench for a game each season. They're too good as individual players. We've spoken a lot of this, Jonny. I've written about it quite a few times. Never really materialised, the two of them playing together. And in my mind, looking back at it now in hindsight, you can only imagine that the benefits of playing both maybe didn't supersede the benefits of what that would do for the team, because we only saw it sparingly, and we only really saw it, especially even under Van Bronckhorst as he come in, we're only seen it as a kind of reactive approach in game when you're trying to see out a game, as opposed to something to with which you would start with, and that to me does seem a little bit of almost a bit of a shame that we never seen them together. But ultimately, at this moment in time, I think James Tavernier is the better right back. His numbers are quite remarkable. His consistency is. There's a reason that every manager he's worked under at Rangers clearly rates him so highly. And he's only 30. I seen you said on Twitter, I think last night or this morning, he could play feasibly for another number of years. And I think in this day and age, you could see James Tavernier certainly playing in the Scottish Premiership for another 5-6 years, and the club will have considered that obviously when they're looking at the long-term longevity of the right back situation at the moment, won't they?
Yeah, Tavernier's a long-term right back. That's obvious. He signed the new deal, and the moment he signed that new deal, I think we were all wondering what that meant, because it was quite obvious that Nathan Patterson was the heir apparent. And I think a lot of us thought maybe Tavernier might be the one to be sold. If you're going back 2-3 years ago, there was Kismay there, wasn't there? But Tavernier got to an age where it was going to be difficult for him to bring in big money if he was sold. He's very, very happy. He's the club captain. So the way it's panned out, it's just made it very, very difficult for Nathan Patterson. But look, that's the ultimate testament to Tavernier's quality. We can, and as we do on the Rangers Review, furnish people with all the facts and the data and the figures that we see from StatsBomb that shows that James Tavernier is a phenom at this level. He's just an absolutely unbelievable player, and people don't realise just how statistically good James Tavernier is in terms of the numbers that he's pulling in season after season after season. It's remarkable. And the ultimate validation of that, away from the numbers, is the fact that you've got a young player who's going straight into the Premier League, who's going straight into one of the top 8 or 9 clubs in the Premier League, to be managed by Rafa Benitez, a Champions League winner, obviously, if the deal goes through. And this guy could not usurp James Tavernier. So that's the ultimate validation of Tavernier's qualities, and the perfect bit of information to underline all that data that shows how good this guy is.
Absolutely. Lots of questions coming in, Jonny, about how this impacts the incomings at Ibrox, which we'll get to in a minute. But firstly, I just want to touch on this topic of a marker being set, as you've said at the top of the show. Obviously, Rangers, it's a high price for a player that's only started 2 league games. You have to contextualise his international appearances, as you say, his potential, which is all very obvious. Do you see this, Jonny, then being the only outgoing this month? Often you hear in football clubs, you look at the way some clubs operate. Leicester, for example, spring to mind. They'll only sell one important player at any given time. Do you see that this Patterson deal impacting other outgoings, in this month and in the summer?
Well, I think what you've got to remember, and I think this is also important, is the money that's been brought in, not just potentially if Patterson moves. And we've got to remember he's not moved yet. As I said, medical, personal terms still to go, and things can go wrong. But if Patterson is to move, you've got to factor in the fact they've also taken in roughly £5 million from Steven Gerrard's move to Aston Villa as well. So there's been a lot of money brought in. If this deal goes through in this window, Rangers will not be in a position where they have to sell anyone. They weren't in a position that they had to sell anyone anyway. Ultimately, this has been about being the right move for the club. That's not to say, though, Joshua, that if a large bid comes in, say somebody comes in with £25 million for Joe Aribo, Rangers are not in a position to turn down those kind of bids, because at the end of the day, the guy's got 18 months left on his contract. And that is another bid that, for me, would be a very, very good bit of business and allow Rangers to go back into the market. Now, they don't need to accept that bid, but you have to ask yourself, why would you turn it down if something like that came up? You could say, well, the league title, you need Joe Aribo or Ryan Kent to qualify for the Champions League. So I suppose at that point, it would go back to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. He'd have to make the decision whether he could go out and take 10 million of that and buy a couple of players that would strengthen the squad. Now, listen, we've seen this before. And this is going back to when you were just a mere fledgling, Joshua. But I remember very, very well when John Allen Boumsong left Rangers in the Alex McLeish era in the January transfer window. And McLeish used that 8 or 9 million to go out and re-sign Barry Ferguson, sign Kiriakos, sign Thomas Buffel, And it was those players, I think, ultimately that made the difference and led the team to the title. As good as Boomsong was for Rangers, that money coming in allowed a complete reorganisation of the team. And it might be that an offer like that comes in for something like that. And it's purely speculation what I'm saying here. I don't have any inside knowledge. But I think Rangers fans will be aware that every player at the club, and the club has been completely open about this, has a price. And every offer that has to come in has to be looked at its own merits. And they also have to factor in players' contracts. And there's a number of players at Rangers that's contracts are running out in 18 months' time. Mm-hmm. And we all know if you allow a contract to go on, the longer it goes on without a new contract being signed, then the more difficult it is to get top dollar for the player.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, right. Well, let's talk finally, Jonny, about signings and incomings and what this means if indeed it does go through. John asking, who do we bring in to back up Tavernier? No one wants to sit on the bench. That's a good point, and something that I'm sure any potential incoming player would be looking at in terms of minutes. Do you think Jonny, that suggests a player with a bit of versatility will come in? Because as we've seen, Tavernier can play 90% of games in a season, and that will be a factor surely in any player that comes into the club. They will look at the minutes that he has played, and they will realistically know they're not going to play that much football if they only play in the right back position.
How good's Leon Balogun as a right back? Watch the last game against Celtic at Ibrox. That's what I would say. How much joy did Kyogo Furuhashi, arguably the most informed striker in Scotland this year, get out of Leon Balogun? Not very much. So can you trust Leon Balogun to slot in for 10% of games in a season? I don't think there's a lot of problems there. I really don't. You've got these young lads coming through. You've got Balogun there. I think you're spot on there, Joshua, about a player who can be multifunctional. So there's been a lot of chat about this boy Jimmy Sands from America. I'm led to believe he can play right back, as well as a number of other positions. So, given you've got Balogun there, you've got Tavernier there, who's a machine who never really gets injured very often. I think you've got enough in the tank if you bring that guy in. But even if you don't bring him in, I'm not concerned about right back because you've got Leon Balogun there. And I know Leon Balogun's been injured, but I don't think Leon Balogun's going to get all that many minutes going forwards, because I do believe that Calvin Bassey has made that left centre-back role his own, and you've got Philip Helander, who we know is a terrific player as well there, and Connor Golson plays every game. So Balogun as an option in there, I think, makes sense.
Yeah, okay. And just finally, Jonny, just from Nathan Patterson's point of view, do you think there's any reluctance at all from him? And what I mean by that is, obviously, we know he's a Rangers supporter. He broke through last season, and you'd imagine he'd have wanted to play a lot more games for Rangers before, if inevitably he did move down to the Premier League. But is it a case of players these days, when you're that good at that age, he needs to prioritise his career and he needs to prioritise minutes? And as you say, Everton, although not in the best moment as a club, it's a good stage to be moving at 19, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, Everton are a big club. And the guys that run Everton are seriously invested in spending some cash. They're moving to a huge new stadium. And they've got a great manager there. I know he's not had the best starts, and he's one of these guys that tends to have either very, very good spells at clubs or very, very bad ones, and it's not looking great at Everton at the moment. But, if it doesn't work out with Rafa Benitez, they'll go and get another good manager. The last manager was Carlo Ancelotti. So that tells you about the ambition that there is to make that club really, really top level. Mm-hmm. He's not playing at Rangers. He's not getting a lot of game time. So it's not like you're going to go to that old adage where you say, you're going to give up first-team football. Well, he's not giving up first-team football because he's not getting it. Yeah. So if he goes down there and he's Seamus Coleman's backup, then, it's exactly the same situation. But he's playing in the Premier League. He'll be weighed in terms of his salary. So you can see the attraction, put it that way. And any young player nowadays, ultimately their goal is going to be to play at the elite level, and the elite level is the English Premier League. And that's the difference. Like when I was growing up, I'm 40 and you're obviously a lot younger than me, Joshua, but when I was growing up as a kid in school, everyone, if you looked around the playground, everybody would be in Scottish football tops. So they'd be Aberdeen tops, because Aberdeen were big when I was a kid, Rangers tops, Celtic tops, the local, I'm from Perth, so there was a lot of St Johnstone tops and things like that. There was not English tops. Maybe one kid had a Liverpool top. But now, if I go and pick up my nephew from school and they're playing football or whatever, they're all in Man City, Barcelona, Real Madrid. You know, the game is completely polarised in those 30 years. Mm-hmm. So you have to be realistic of that's how young kids think. That's how the sort of television model, that's what's created. Mm-hmm. So a move down there is always going to be really, really attractive for young players. But we'll have to see, because as I say, and I've said it a few times, medical, personal terms still have to be agreed.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, we'll leave it there today, Jonny. Thank you all to all of you who have joined in and watched and asked questions along with us this morning. We'll be back every morning this week as ever. Remember, you can subscribe over at the website rangersreview.co.uk for top quality journalism covering the club you love. Some great content there over the weekend, which you can go and peruse as you so wish today. Until tomorrow, we'll be back again at 9:30. Enjoy the rest of your month.